video, I will be demonstrating making Rabo Encendido from Memories of a Cuban Kitchen by Mary Urrutia Randelman and Joan Schwartz, published in 1996. I grew up in Miami for middle and high school, and one of the things I miss most about living there is the authentic Cuban restaurants serving croquetas, Cuban sandwiches, ropa vieja. And Memories of a Cuban Kitchen is the book that I recommend if you want to get started in learning how to cook Cuban food at home. I've asked some of my friends who are Cuban from back in the day who also cook, and they've told me that this is kind of just an old time classic. The food is old school. It's not going to be new modern twists or fusion or new takes on. This is just the classic recipes, and that's kind of always where I recommend starting with any cuisine. The instructions in this book are clear, and every classic dish I can think of is included in the book. And one night I decided to try making something I'd never heard of before, which is chuletas de puerco criollas, which is Cuban spiced pork chops smothered in sauteed onions. And I did not regret taking the chance on something new. Everything I've tried in this book so far has been really good. The dish we're making today is an oxtail stew that also hits many of the classic Cuban flavor notes, but also includes two wines and a lot of other and a protein that has gained a lot of popularity in recent years in foodie groups and circles. So if this is one of my most recommended books for learning a new cuisine, if Cuban cuisine is something that you've wanted to try or that you want to learn to make at home, please pick this book up. You will not regret it. All right, on to the recipe for today.
Here is the setup for Rabo Encendido. We have our oxtail meat. We've got potatoes, we've got green bell pepper, cumin, oregano, chopped garlic, bay leaf, tomato sauce, chopped onion, beef broth, red cooking wine, lime juice, olive oil, cooking sherry, and here is sort of the special ingredient besides oxtails we have here this is Spanish chorizo. If you saw my video on enchiladas de Fresnillo, you saw Mexican chorizo. This is Spanish chorizo, and this is going to go in our Rabo Encendido. So with all that being said, let's get started. Okay, so we have our olive oil heating in our enameled Dutch oven, cast iron Dutch oven. I highly recommend you get one of those, by the way. It's a very, very useful tool that's really helped my cooking. So the next thing we're going to do is just salt and pepper our oxtails here a little bit. And that's way too much, but that's all right. And we're also going to go ahead and sprinkle a little lime juice over them. And then let that go ahead and marinate for a second here. And then we're going to go ahead and go into the pan with them. Turn that up a bit. Okay, and then this is going to go for a little bit here. Let's go ahead and salt and pepper the top also. So when we flip them, we're going to essentially just brown them on both sides here. So you probably want some, at this phase, you probably want some tongs. And we'll let that heat up here for a second. You're going to want some tongs to flip them once they brown. So once the first side is browned, I'll be back and I'll do the flip and then we'll move on to the next step.
Okay, we have removed our oxtails from the pot, and now we are going to fry these vegetables here. We've dumped in the onions, the green bell peppers, and the garlic, and we're going to fry these here for a little while in the oil, and we want them to absorb all of that browned oxtail juice goodness as well as the olive oil that was in there. And then what we're going to do after that is we're going to return the oxtail to the pot, and literally we're just putting in all of the other ingredients except for the potatoes, because this is all going to cook for about 2 hours in this Dutch oven at a slow simmer. And I don't chop up the oxtails ahead of time, because cooking for that long, the meat is going to fall off the bone at that point. So that's going to be great. That's going to be delicious. I'll show you what that looks like when it's in progress and when we add the potatoes as well. And Yeah, so that's really all there is to it. This is not a difficult recipe, but it is delicious. You get that sort of quintessential Cuban flavor with oregano, cumin, tomato, citrus is really sort of a differentiator for Cuban cuisine versus something like Mexican, where there's more citrus in Cuban cuisine. And yeah, that's going to smell really good. Then about 30 minutes before, we will add the potatoes. They'll go in, and then we'll have a stew that's ready to go. So, all right, I'm going to leave you there, and I'm going to continue cooking these vegetables, and then I'm going to put everything in, and then I'll show you what that looks like.
Okay, here is all of the ingredients added to our Dutch oven. First of all, let me apologize for not showing adding all of the ingredients. I messed up the recording, but it was literally just dumping the ingredients in the pot with the vegetables that we were cooking. So we returned the 2 oxtails to the pot. We also added our Spanish chorizo, and we've put in the beef stock. We put in both wines, the sherry wine and the red wine. And we also put in our seasonings. We put in a bay leaf, cumin, oregano. I have not done salt and pepper yet because I like to do that at the end with soups, long cooking soups like this. This has been cooking for about an hour. But it's going to go on for 2, and in about half an hour, I'm going to add the potatoes, and I promise you I will show you that. But I like to do salt and pepper at the end because in long cooking stews like this, the flavor tends to develop over time, and I like to sort of know what that final flavor is going to be like before I add any additional salt and pepper. Gumbo is quite similar in this way, and I definitely will show you a gumbo video someday too because it's really fun to make. And you're going to think that you're doing everything horribly wrong the whole way through, and then like magic, it just comes through at the end and is absolutely delicious. So, all right, I'm going to let this continue to cook. I'm going to go chop some potatoes, and then we'll be back to add the potatoes to the stew. All right, we're at about an hour and a half now, and we're ready to put the potatoes in. I chopped those up, and yeah, we're going to... The recipe said a quarter of the potatoes, and I was like, I can't fit a quarter of a big potato like this in my mouth, and I'm a pretty big guy, so I just chopped them up into a decently large size, just because the recipe did say to make them large. But yeah, we're just going to go ahead and add all these in, and these are for the last half hour. These are going to cook in with everything else. So if you're a meat and potatoes kind of person, but you want a Cuban, Caribbean, Hispanic twist to it, this is probably the recipe for you, because it is mostly meat and potatoes with a little bit of alcohol and sausage. So it doesn't get much more. I guess, masculine than that, right? So these potatoes also have a lot of starch in them, so they probably will help the stew thicken a little bit as well. It is starting to be a little thick already as it's cooked for so long, but that'll help continue things. So, all right, I'm going to let this continue to cook for the last half hour, and then I will show you guys the result when we're ready to eat. Okay, the soup is done, and one thing I do want to show you here that happens a lot of times with stews like this, this is a really fatty piece of meat. The actual meat part of it will come off really easily at this point. See how that just sort of, that meat part just came off. But this really dark red color is actually oil, and we don't want that when we eat. So I'm just going to go through the process here of just using the spoon to skim off as much of that oil as I can and get rid of it before serving it up. So that's going to take me a little bit of time, but I just wanted to show you that, so if this happens with your stew, you can do the same thing. Okay, so you can see how rich and thick this stew is. I pulled the oxtails out and individually, or I'm sorry, just pulled the meat off of it and returned it to the pot to make it easier to pour and eat for everybody. I also took out the bay leaf. But yeah, this is definitely because of the chorizo sausage, and oxtail is also an oily piece of meat. I had to remove a lot of oil at the top there. So, all right, I'm going to plate this up and we're going to have dinner. All right, here is our plated Rabo Encendido. I'm glad I mentioned this earlier in the video. I didn't actually need to add any salt and pepper. The salt and pepper from the sausage and from seasoning earlier actually made it come out with the correct flavor. So that's why I don't like to add until the very end after tasting. So hopefully yours comes out exactly the same way. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.